The Demon 170 strikes again. Now listen, before I go any further, I have to make this perfectly clear, all right? I am in no way throwing shade at anybody involved in this story. This is something that's happened to all of us to one degree or another over the years. If you screw around with cars long enough, you're gonna come across a project that bites you in the ass. The thing that seems straightforward, that seems like, okay, yeah, I got this covered, and then it takes on a life of its own and goes into all kinds of crazy directions. We've all been there. I feel for these guys. They're handling it like troopers. But this is indicative of the situation that we're in today. I've done countless videos over the last couple of years about runaway technology. And this story exemplifies what I'm talking about. All right, now the Demon 170. Over the last year, a couple of crazy things have happened with this car. The first was, people using it for its intended purpose, which was drag racing, and having oil starvation issues and wiping out the bottom end of the engines. So we did a video on that, and we talked about some of the possible causes and oil splash, the front sup oil pan being an issue, inadequate baffling, inadequate volume of oil. Regardless, it was a mysterious thing. Nobody ever really got to the bottom of it. Then, not too long after that, a couple of Demon 170s showed up at different shops, and the story was that they were missing main bearings from the factory, off the assembly line. So these engines had problems, they tore them down and found that they were missing a main bearing. Now I called nonsense on that, because there is no way an engine could have been built, dropped in the car, and then driven even from the assembly point to the shipping area. No way that this would have been able to, that the engine would have functioned with no oil pressure issues, with no noises, right? But nevertheless, a couple of different people did claim that the engines were built without main bearings. What am I gonna say? But now this pops up, this video comes to my attention a couple of days ago. And so I'm gonna paraphrase the story here. I'm gonna just give a quick rundown of what happened. But for the full story, go to Scrapped Life Lee, that's the name of the channel, and watch the video, okay? Watch the video, because like I said, I'm gonna paraphrase, but he can lay out all of the details and the whole chain of events that led up to what this is. So, to make a long story short, they go to an auction and they buy a stolen, recovered Demon 170. So this thing only had like 100 miles on it. It was an executive's car. It got stolen, it got chopped, but all of the big components were recoverable. So the main part of the body and the engine, the transmission, the rear end, some of the electronics were missing. Okay, so they go about rebuilding this car, which is something that they do. They specialize in rebuilding cars. These guys are no dummies. They have a beautiful shop. They clearly know what they're doing. Okay, so that's why I said at the very beginning of this, no way throwing shade at these guys. So they essentially rebody the car. They paint it Panther pink, and it's sharp. The car is just beautiful, right? They install all of the suspension and the drivetrain, and everything is together in the car except for the interior, because the interior is the last thing you're going to put in on this thing, because the electronics get routed all through the interior of the car. So before you can put the interior together, you have to do the electronics. And this is where things ran amok. So they ordered all new modules straight from the factory, all of the various modules that control this thing. They order them, plus they had a few of them left over from the original car. They plug everything in, all of the original wiring, everything the way it's supposed to be. They can't get any reaction out of it at all. Nothing, right? So they start going through conventional methods of troubleshooting and diagnosing this thing, right? And there's many VIN numbers pop up. Everything is VIN locked. Everything's got to be, to security features, right? What it is it's hardcore planned obsolescence, right? So you can't just replace parts simply the way you have forever, right? We have forever. No, now everything has to be programmed. So they find that this thing has like over a dozen different VIN numbers involved in the various modules and control systems of the car. They try their best. They spend a bunch of time trying to make everything work with everything else, and they get nothing, right? So now they start plugging into the Mopar brain trust. Right now, there are people who make a living doing nothing but tuning and setting up these late model Mopars that work on the electronics of these cars. This is what they do. These are reputable shops that turn out work on a regular basis. They contact a bunch of different, there was Stark Performance. They ship the car off to an expert. They give up, right? Okay, this thing is beyond our, our scope. They ship it off to a company that does nothing but work on late model Mopar electronics. They strike out. They've got the car for months. They can't do anything with it. They send it back. Now they take all of the various electronics from this car and they send them off to people who hack them, right? So they open up these modules. They physically open up the modules and they redo whatever it is that they have to do to try to get it all to work together. Still nothing. So after 6 months, and what they say is about 100 hours of their own time, plus all of the time spent shipping the car and at these other shops, it still doesn't work. Where they leave off is, on this last video, is they get the headlights to work. They get the horn and the headlights to work. And that's it. How is this even remotely possible? Right? Now again, I got to say this again, I am in no way throwing shade at the guys who were involved in this. They're up against it, and they've got the pressure of trying to perform for YouTube. That's difficult. Let me tell you something, because you want to look like you do this stuff, and you want to look like you know what you're doing, right? So there's a pressure in when you start a project to get it like completed with a minimum of craziness, a minimum of the unknown. So there's a lot, right? There's a lot on your head when you do this stuff. After all of this time, all of these shops, all of this effort, all of this hacking, they've got the headlights working, and they had a signal to the starter relay. Why they weren't able to go any further yet, I'm not sure. But like I said, go watch the video. The moral of the story is that yes, the Demon is part of the Challenger family, the Hellcat family. It shares the basic electronics, but for whatever reason, the electronics built into that car are unworkable, unhackable, I don't even know what you would call it. It can't be fixed. I mean, obviously somebody's going to come up with a solution, right? Eventually, somebody's going to figure it out and put it all together, okay? But why would it take so much time? Why is there so much complication? It had to have been done deliberately by the original programmers, right? It's not just happenstance. It had to be built into the car. So what that means is that even though you have, if you have the latest technology, you have the latest know-how, you have a collective, a brain trust that knows these cars, knows the electronics intimately, if the original software designers, the engineers who put all of this system together, if they don't want you in there, you ain't going to get in there. At least you're not going to do it in any reasonable time or reasonable cost. God only knows how much these guys have invested in this car at this point to not get it started. This should have been a simple, straightforward thing. Piece the car back together again, put the drivetrain in it, plug all the stock electronics in, program it so it all works together, fire it up and run, right? It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. And it's getting worse. This is an exception now, but as automotive technology goes forward and the companies, the manufacturers, want a firmer lock on the repairability of these cars, the things that are happening with Demon 170 is proof that they can do it, that they can and will lock you out. Now, I already see the comments. A lot of you guys like, well, just put a standalone in there and just, run the engine off a standalone, run the engine and transmission off a standalone computer. Well, that's great, except that the rest of the car, every other bit of the car, is integrated into this system. So yeah, you can get the engine to run. Hell, you could drop a points distributor and a friggin' carburetor and the engine will run. Hardwire the transmission, you'll get it to shift. Okay, but what about the rest of the car? Yeah, you can stand alone to make it run, but how are you going to make the speedometer work? How are you going to make the interior? It's all wired together. All of the modules that control the door locks and the windows and the radio and the heating system and everything. It's all tied together. And as has been seen recently, other channels, and we've talked about this, you've got situations like where backup cameras go bad and brick the car. It's getting worse. All this is like a punctuation mark to exactly the things that we've been talking about on this channel for a long time now. But it's really starting to come to a head. It's really starting to become obvious. I have no solutions. I have no answers. You know, ideally, I'd love to see automotive technology rolled back to the 1990s, and it's fine from there. It's handleable. It's workable. Me personally, I'd like to see it go back to the 70s. I'm a points guy. I started out obviously as a carb and points guy because I came from the era before EFI. But when EFI started to evolve in the 1980s, I was right there. I was on top of it. I was a big fan of all of this stuff. It was only after it started to run amok that I was like, you know, on my way out. And then the CAN bus era started, and that's it. Done. You know, go watch their video, right? It's an interesting video. It's a beautiful car, I got to tell you. It just looks right in that color. They seem like really nice, very capable guys, and they're in the middle of a demonic. It's demonic technology. It's what it is. It's demonic technology. It's taking our freedom away. It's taking the freedom to repair. I know, the right to repair. Louis Rossmann, I know. I'd love to sit down with Louis Rossmann and do something. And Louis, if you're watching this, let's get together sometime and do a live. We're both New Yorkers, we're ex-New Yorkers. We both escaped the zoo. So, yeah, the Demon 170 strikes again. Demonic technology, guys. It's crazy. I'll see you tomorrow.